All right.
I've got my
You guys ready?
blue pencil.
Yeah? Okay. All right, I call to order the Thursday, July 10th, 2014 Ferndale Planning Commission special meeting. Roll call, please.
Chair Roediger.
Here.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Brazen.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Piana.
Here.
Commissioner Vetrano.
Here.
Commissioner Czar. Commissioner Forrest.
Can I get a motion to excuse Commissioner Czar and Forrest?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Next up, approval of the agenda. Any modifications to the agenda? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve as submitted.
I move to approve as submitted.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the agenda stands. Next up, we have approval of the minutes from the last meeting, our long meeting from June 12th, 2014. I think the minutes are on the table this evening. I'm actually going through right now. I have a couple of just typos and grammatical things I'll hand after the meeting. So if we can make a motion to approve any typographical and content type changes like that.
I would move to approve the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, June 12, 2014, as edited by Commissioner.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That brings us to the bulk of our meeting. New business. We have a public hearing this evening for the DTE substation at 1550 Hilton Road. We'll have Derek introduce the subject, and we'll have the applicant give a brief overview, and then we'll open up the public hearing to anyone in the audience. We ask if you want to speak, you come to the podium, state your name and address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. With that, Derek, do you want to do a brief introduction?
I do. I don't think it's any secret that the city's been working with DTE now for the last couple of years, trying to identify an appropriate site for a new substation, whether it's in Ferndale or Hazel Park. The communities have been working together to try to find a location. It was identified over the last several years that there's been an issue with power gaps when we've had storms and other things, and DTE has been a good partner in trying to find a site. So over the last 6 months or so, DTE identified a site that is actually addressed to Hilton, but it's at the dead end of East Saratoga, just east of Bonner. It sits between the dead end of Saratoga, the railroad tracks, and Hilton. It's actually accessed off Hilton. It's zoned general industrial, which is the appropriate zoning district for a utility substation in the city. The zoning ordinance does dictate that a substation is a special land use within that district. So we have done an initial site plan review. And that site plan is here before you tonight with a recommendation for approval. And we have done the special land use review as well, and have identified no issues with the special land use request as associated with the site and or the area. We did notice the property in accordance with the zoning ordinance for a public hearing for the special land use. At this point, we have gotten no responses or no comments from the public internally or in writing related to the request. Staff is recommending approval of both the special land use request and the site plan request, and we are obviously here for any questions going forward for the rest of the night. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm assuming the applicant is here. It looks like we have a presentation.
Yes, we do. Yes. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, and members of the staff. My name is Michael Palchesko. I am the Regional Manager of Corporate and Government Affairs for DTE here in Oakland County. And on behalf of my teammates here from DTE, we'd like to say thank you for this opportunity to present our proposed project to you, but also like to say thank you to Derek Delacourt for, again, all the help he's provided us, as he touched on, and direction he's given us in going through the process. And I also like to mention City Manager April Lynch has also been helpful as we've had some conversations getting prepared for this proposal. So tonight, I just want to introduce a few of our people that are here tonight. From my far right, Carl McNeil is our senior engineer, and shortly Carl's going to come to the podium, or if you like, he'll just sit there and go through the presentation. To Carl's left is Nick Carlson. Nick is the supervising engineer of our distribution system here in Ferndale and also the surrounding area. Carl's the senior engineer in distribution planning, responsible for overseeing the planning and design of our system here in the community of Ferndale. And right behind these two gentlemen is Mick Blunden. Mick's our corporate permit coordinator at DTE. We have a few others, and if if a subject comes up that they're ready to address, then they'll introduce themselves at that time. So with that as a background, I'm going to step back and let Carl McNeil go through the presentation packet that we provided tonight.
Okay, thank you. Good
I'd
evening.
like to thank you for this opportunity to go through the plan for Ferndale, for renewing the system in Ferndale. Go to the first slide. This is a summary of why we need to build a substation in Ferndale and what's involved in doing that. We're proposing to build a new substation. It's going to be 120 kV fed. That's the voltage of the ITC transmission line that goes right by the site. And it will be 120 to 13.2 kV. And the lot where we'll be doing that has been referred to already. The western part of that property is a vacant lot. It's like a field, and that's where we would be placing the substation. And the reasons for doing this has a lot to do with the load. It's a load-related issue, and the load on the system around the substation doesn't lend itself to relieving Ferndale. If there's load problems in Ferndale, we can't transfer the load to other adjacent substations very easily because they're loaded as well. The main risk that we have at Ferndale and Hazel Park is pretty much the same situation. It's in the middle of the summer when you have your air conditioning load, the system is loaded to its peak, and if at that same time you lose some element in the substation, that substation would be at reduced capacity, reduced from its maximum capability. So at those times, we can run into problems as we did in 2011. And then we need new load to serve new capacities to serve new load in the area. It's still a growth area, and so we can't just band-aid this existing system. We need new load to get a good solid solution. So we're planning on building the substation, and many of those problems were on the sub-transmission system, so that feed the existing substations. And we've had cable failures, and this new design will address that issue. It won't be using sub-transmission trunk lines. We'll be using the 120 kV transmission system. And we're also upgrading the entire overhead distribution system that's served now from both the Hazel Park substation and the Ferndale substation. And you probably are aware that the Hazel Park substation is in Ferndale. You can get thrown off by the name, but it is in Ferndale. And our schedule would be to start likely in 2015. So that's just a summary of what we plan to do and why we plan to build a substation. So we'll move on to some of the slides that show more detail. The number one, the star there on the map, is the location for the existing Ferndale substation. Number two is the location for the existing Hazel Park substation, and number three is the location for the new substation. It's ideally suited location-wise because it's at the center of the load. The circuits can come out of it and go east and west and pick up the existing loads. It's also right next to the 120 kV transmission line, and it's very close to the underground conduit, so that would be relatively easy and inexpensive to connect to the existing system as opposed to some other location. So this is an overhead view of the property, and also showing what equipment will be going on it and where it will go. On the right-hand side, those structures represent circuit breakers at the 120 kV level, and also transformers that transform the 120 kV to 13.2 distribution voltages. And over on the left side, there's a lineup of switchgear, two lineups of switchgear with 18 load-carrying circuit positions there. There's a lot of detail in this map. I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's basically just another drawing of what you've already saw. And the next slide is showing like an elevation view. That tall structure that you see there is already an existing structure. We're not building that. And so you can see below that, you see where the transmission line is expected to come in. And you can see a wall there. There's a 12-foot concrete wall that will be going around the substation. This is a map of the conduit system that we plan to build. The black is existing. The conduit extends farther than this, but for the purposes of this graphic here, we're just showing where we're connecting the new conduit to it. So the red is what we'd be building. And this is an overview of the area that the existing substations feed. The circuits in blue, I'll give you an idea with the pointer here. Let's just turn on. Pardon me? Was it? Okay, this is the blue area here. See, these circuits are blue. So that is now the Ferndale distribution system on the overhead, and the red is Hazel Park. That's where Hazel Park serves now. So this new substation, and this here line here is your boundary for Ferndale. So the new substation, which is here, would serve that entire area. We do it in 2 stages, but that's what it's going to serve. Now I'm just about finished off the presentation. This is a slide that we put here just in anticipation of a question. It's just 2 slides to deal with this issue, and that would be, well, you're building a substation. Is it going to be noisy? So this will give you an idea of the noise that you would expect to get from the substation. For instance, I have this red line on the map here at the number 200. 200 is feet. It's the distance from the fence of the substation out to Hilton Road, where, you know, not too many people are getting closer than that. So what is the noise level at 200 feet? If you look here, it's 45 decibels. Okay, so what does 45 decibels represent? So I'll go to this chart, and 45 falls in between right here. It's about equivalent to the sound of a computer or a refrigerator. When the substation is completed, there'll be 3 transformers there, so it would be about the equivalent of standing next to 3 refrigerators that's running. That's about the sound level you'd hear at Hilton Road. And also the wall will probably deaden the sound somewhat as well. So I don't think you really have a sound issue. So that is the presentation. Also, I forgot to mention, this is a significant investment in this project. I'm estimating around $55 million. So we knew the substation itself is the catalyst to do the overhead work. And we're talking extensive work. And that's the presentation. If you'd like me to explain any more aspects of it, I can.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, let's open up the public hearing and see if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to address the Planning Commission on this topic. I don't know if this is all your team.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah. Okay, you're all together then. All right, so then we would open and close the public hearing, seeing no public comment. All right, thank you. So that, I guess we'll bring it back to the commission, and happy to answer or ask any questions of staff or of the applicant. As I'm sure you've been explained, this is a special land use, which does give the city some discretionary review criteria to ensure compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. ensure that the use is designed appropriately for the specific site. So I do appreciate the discussion on the noise. I think that was going to be one of our questions. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about the wall? You said there's a 12-foot wall. In terms of the materials, is it in keeping with the buildings around it? I guess, what does that wall look like? I think you indicated concrete panels.
Yes, I'd like to recommend that the designer.
My name is Mark Fairless. I'm an engineer with the Architectural Civil Towers Group with DTE, and I actually brought some photos of the wall system we're planning to use, so I can share them with you.
Thank you.
And this is a 12-foot wall that fully encloses the site?
Correct. It would be around the entire perimeter of the substation. It's a decorative precast slat panel system.
I see in here that there's, are you proposing it to be lit? I know that this one shows some light on it.
No,
so I just
there would be
wondering.
no light on the exterior of the wall. The only lighting would be internal to the substation, and it would only be utilized when there's an operator there during an emergency at night, that type of thing. It's all switched.
Gotcha. Okay. Open up to the commission for questions or comments. I think this is one of these things where, it's a necessary part of our life. I think no one appreciates losing power. And I think I bragged. I used to say I jinxed it because I swore we never lost power here in Ferndale, ever, as far as I remember up until the last couple of years. So I'm sure my neighbors will all be happy to hear that you guys are been working with the city to fix that, hopefully. So I think.
Through the chair, I've got a question for
Sure.
our director. I don't know if you were here, but I was certainly here in 2011 when Carl and Michael were here talking about this.
Very different circumstance at that time.
So glad you're back. We know we need it, and one of the things that we talked about in 2011 were some of the developments that were happening along 8 Mile, particularly the Meyer development that was going in that we thought, might in some way need to pull from our side of town. We also talked about the change in the ways that energy is being consumed. So even though we'd had a number of industrial businesses close on the side of town because every house now has AC, things were pulling in peak hours were different. So does this, it sounds like it does, but will this upgrade help to accommodate some of the projects that you're working on in the industrial district surrounding it? Is it enough capacity, or are we going to be back here again in 10 years? Or?
Well, I by no means am I an electrical engineer, but in talking with Michael and Mick, yes, we do think these will help assist some of those developments, especially some of the ones that are larger power draws. And if you have anybody in your team can help me explain this better, why folks like, we met on Allied Printing and some of the other ones, why this substation helps provide them power, and better than that, helps limit the interruptions from storms and non-tree, tree events are unfixable, those types of things down wires. But this helps correct some of the brownouts, some of the rolling stuff, some of the intermittent power outages they've had, which is really their biggest problem. The industrial companies and the companies we have here understand when there's a storm and there's something unforeseen, but it was the middle of the afternoon in the summer when there was the rolling brownouts and stuff. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this will do a considerable amount to help alleviate those types of concerns from our businesses, and it's
even with eventual capacity growth.
Yes, even with growth, it's certainly, and it's going to help support the growth of the area as well, from what I understand. So he might be able to explain a little bit better technically why.
Okay, I think I got the gist of the question. The plan is to be able to serve new development on the fairgrounds south of 8 Mile, and also the Meyer development that's there now. When that Meyer development came along, we would have liked to have put it on the Hazel Park substation, but we couldn't do that with the loads that were there. So once the substation is built, I expect Myers will come back to that area, and probably we'll be able to serve whatever new development there is at the fairgrounds. And also the other growth area is the zoo area. We can probably help out there if it can't be served from existing substations.
And if I understand correctly, for both our existing customers and the growth of our existing businesses, those new developments would have pulled from their capacity. This will prevent them from being having a limited capacity as those new developments come online with the new substation. So it'll take several years to build and transfer, but it should protect our long-term growth as well.
That's great.
Yes, you were fairly maxed out as far as, or we were maxed out as far as our capability to serve no load bus, and that's why I kept saying we need new capacity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, I'll get a little more technical here to address the switching. 13.2 kV circuits can handle about 12 MVA of load. The 4.8 system, the maximum load you can get on even a good design system is about 4 MVA, so it's 3 times. We can load the 13.2 to about 7 MVA per circuit, and then we can install loop scheme switches between the circuits so that restoration would happen automatically. It's programmed into the devices called reclosers to do that. And the 13.2 system is a ground-wise system, and you can fuse that, makes sense to fuse a Y system, whereas the 4.8 system is a delta system. It rarely has fuses because the only function they provide is to protect for line-to-line faults. So you have lots, you can really penetrate a lot more sectionalizing into a Y-grounded system like the 13.2 system is that we're proposing. One difference it will make is when you do have a storm and you have some outages, you can restore a lot more of the circuit. Once a fuse is operated or a recloser, the rest of the system usually stays intact, stays energized, whereas on the 4.8 system, a lot of times if you get a fault on the circuit, the whole circuit goes out because there is no sectionalizing to protect the rest of the system. The circuit breaker opens at the substation and stays open until we fix everything on circuit, then we restore it. So it's a lot, usually it's a lot faster to restore. You get more customers back quicker with a grounded Y system.
Which sounds good.
Which is exactly what they want. Restored faster,
exactly
yes.
what
Less
happened
intermittent
last
and
time.
restored faster, if I understand that all
Exactly what
correctly.
happened last time. Because
yeah.
everyone did.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I guess we have 2 motions this evening, one for the special land use, which is a recommendation to City Council, and the second one is a site plan, which is the final authority.
I
of the
have one
board.
question. I don't see the height of the towers on the diagrams, and I was just wondering,
The existing ones?
no, the proposed ones, the
H-frame? How tall are the H-frame?
is that what they're called?
If you go, can you go back to that slide? It's on that slide.
I didn't see it.
I don't think the dimension height, that's actually a good point. I meant to ask that. I don't think the dimension is actually on.
Yeah, the H-frame structures that ITC will be installing to bring the lines in are 80 foot tall to the top, and to that cross member is 72 feet.
And the existing tower
Is 340 feet, I believe. So anything in the substation will be dwarfed by the existing cell phone tower.
How many H-frame towers are there?
2.
2.
You know, when you took me over there, I had a tour of the property. Derek took me there a couple weeks ago, and you can't even tell there's towers there, and I didn't even notice them.
Oh, along the railroad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I went and looked too, and I was like,
I'm like, where is that?
yeah, it's correct.
Yeah, I mean, you never, and they know, we've spoken about this before, you never like to lose a site, a developable site that doesn't have buildings and stuff on it, but as far as a community need, a need to support the businesses and the residential, and a site that, and I think from not, we noticed this, and not seeing any residents here, that has as little impact as possible. This site is about as tucked away behind the railroad, Hilton Road, and some of the existing buildings that you could possibly find. So there's never a great site from a development standpoint for something like this, but because there's a community need for this, DTE did a really good job finding a site, we believe, as staff, that this fits on. So
Perfect. Okay. Other questions or comments?
I have one through the chair. Do you have where's the gate going to be proposed? I know it's on, is there one? Is there
No,
multiple?
there will be 2 gates.
Okay.
The one, the first gate will be right off of Hilton. Do you have that pointer?
Off of Hilton.
the red, right here. There's a little access.
Around the,
Right there, yeah.
around the train tracks?
Correct.
Okay.
And then the tower access is right here, adjacent to their wall. There's an easement for their tower access. So there's a gate right here. And where are you putting the other one over here?
No, right down in the bottom, right about where your elbow is, down by the cell site.
One off the easement that comes down for the. So everything, all the access will happen between Hilton and the railroad tracks.
Correct.
And it looks like from the photos, it kind of opens to one way?
The gate?
Yeah.
Well, the gate will swing out. There'll
Swing
be
out.
swinging gates, correct.
Gotcha.
20-foot wide gates to allow access for equipment and so forth.
And that wall, can we stamp or emboss the Ferndale logo on some of the panels?
It's a yes.
Wouldn't that be good?
Unexpected.
We would have to talk to the manufacturer and see what their capabilities are, I suppose.
All right, with that,
Ask for firms.
The other question I had, I don't know who's controlling the PowerPoint, but if you can maybe go back with the one that shows the overview of where the substations are, the range.
The existing?
Yeah. No, the one that shows what's being covered. And they get the outline of Ferndale, that one. So is that, am I understanding correctly, the light blue background is what's being served by the current Ferndale, the one that's at
substation.
9 and Dover area?
Correct. And the red would be the ones currently served by the Hazel Park substation on 9 Mile east of Hilton, between Hilton and 75.
Gotcha. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Then for the new substation, it covers all that and?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
okay. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, we'll entertain, I guess.
I will make one more comment, just because I think it's important for the record. I'd like to thank DTE. It's a graveled site. It's currently a grass site, but our engineer had some concern about impervious surface and stormwater. DTE was incredibly responsive. Even though it's just going to be all gravel, then there's going to be very little what we consider normal concrete impervious surface. They're doing quite a bit of stormwater improvement to make sure not only that their site drains appropriately and doesn't cause problems on the dead end of Saratoga or towards Hilton, but they've also agreed to make some improvements to improve some of the existing drainage issues that exist with the Bond Plywood building and some other things. So there is, although you don't see the details for it, DTE has agreed to do a considerable amount of underground stormwater work to make sure that we don't have any stormwater problems in that area going forward. So I thought it was probably something they could have argued with us on, but they willingly did it, and I think it'll make an improvement in the area as well for other development. So I just want to get that out there.
All right, I would move in the matter of 1550 Hilton Road, the DTE substation construction, that the Planning Commission recommends to City Council approval of the special land use based on plans dated 4/25/2014 with the findings as enumerated in the written motion.
Support. Okay. And you have a motion that's moved by Baker, seconded by Piana. Can we have roll call, please? I'm sorry. Any discussion or comment?
My only discussion, I'm sorry, I just sort of skipped the 5 findings. Is DTE aware of the findings, or would you like me to read them for the record?
They should be aware of them at this point.
Yeah.
It basically just restates that you're not detracting from the health.
Yeah, they're aware of those. There's nothing outside of the normal special land use criteria, nothing that would impact the site design, so.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? Otherwise, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
Commissioner Brazen?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Piana?
Yes.
Commissioner Vitrano?
Yes.
And Chair Rodiger.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. So we go on the next, I'm assuming next scheduled city council that's available for their consideration. But we do have also the site plan that's tied to the special land use. So we can have a motion for that.
I'll make that motion too, and for this one I will read the findings because these are more than just sort of rote special land use approvals. I would move in the matter of 1550 Hilton Road, the DTE substation construction, that the Planning Commission approve the site plan based on plans dated 4/25/2014 with the following findings. Number 1, the site plan and supporting documents demonstrate that all applicable requirements of the zoning ordinance, as well as other city ordinances, standards, and requirements can be met subject to the conditions noted below. The proposed plan does not negatively affect non-motorized circulation and connection and improves stormwater management on site. 3, off-street parking areas have been designated to avoid common traffic problems and promote safety. Number 4, the proposed improvements should have a satisfactory and harmonious relationship with the development on site, as well as existing development in the adjacent vicinity. Number 5, the proposed development will not have an unreasonably detrimental or injurious effect upon the natural characteristics and features of the site or those of the surrounding area. The only condition listed is that the City Council approve of the special land use.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Baker and supported by Brazen. Any comments or questions on the motion? Otherwise, roll call vote, please. Commissioner Brazen?
Yes.
Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Piana?
Yes.
Commissioner Petrino?
Yes.
And Chair Bodegas? Yes. All right, motion passes. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, next we have old business. Nothing on the agenda this evening. Call to the audience. So unless there's anything else you'd like to.
The photos?
Yeah. All right, seeing no one respond to call to the audience, we bring it back to administrative items. Derek, maybe give an update of some of the things we had a big meeting last time.
I will.
We were expecting, I think, maybe a little bit more tonight, so do you know where we stand with some of those projects?
Yes.
Pizza Hut, too.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's
Sounds like
fair.
a really true laugh there.
Well, I think it's fair to say that subsequent to that meeting, we scheduled them for the Appearance Review Committee, which is a smaller committee governed by ordinance within the city that deals with strictly facade improvements or structural improvements within the DDA. That committee consists of myself, a mayoral or a city manager appointee, and the DDA director. I think it's fair to say that they heard much the same concerns about the exterior appearance of the development at that committee meeting, maybe even a little more directly than here. We advised them that we felt it was probably a poor decision to come back to the Planning Commission at this time without having made some significant improvements to the elevation, especially if they were going to request to continue to move forward with a single-story building. In blatant terms, that they better do something that blows everybody away from a single-story standpoint if they're going to come back with that project. So they took the project and have reevaluated the elevations. We've asked them to also willingly and by choice take the project to the DDA's design committee to talk to them about what they feel is appropriate for redevelopment of that site. I'm not sure yet if they're going to move forward with that. They have submitted revised site plans. They did address some of the smaller questions, but many of the larger issues were left unaddressed. So we'll see where it goes at this point. You know, they may come back and ask to be placed on the agenda as is, and we'll see where that goes in August. But we're hopeful that they heard the message and that they'll at least, if they move forward with the project, have the willingness to meet with the design committee, the appearance review committee, and then bring something back to the Planning Commission that's supported by both of those boards and not something that everybody feels is an inappropriate design for the location. So we'll see where that goes at that point. What else did we talk about at the last meeting? The 360 project, I think
Senior living at
the senior living. Those folks were, actually they came in today. They weren't sure if they were on the agenda today or not. We've met internally with the city's attorney and some other folks. They've even evolved the project a little more since then. They came in with representatives from the Archdiocese, and the city attorney is considering right now if the project as a whole is really accessory to the primary, in which case there would be no zoning action necessary. There's certainly a majority of the components that appear to be accessory to the church use, especially with the church and the Archdiocese committing to involvement in the project. So that evaluation is taking place right now. We're also meeting with Oakland County to talk about what portions of the use may or may not be tax exempt. So those meetings are taking place right now, and we don't have definite answers on those currently. So it's leaning towards that the use is an accessory use and that only components of it are tax exempt. So we may get a decision from a zoning standpoint that the whole thing is accessory, at which point it may actually fall under the administrative approval for a site plan because they're not doing any additions or expansions, it's all landscaping and screening and things. So the site plan part of it may not actually even end up back here, unless there's something that we're just not comfortable approving administratively. The medical marijuana folks have been moving forward. We've spoken with them on several occasions. And actually, I have a question for the Planning Commission in relation to that project. They are scheduled for not this City Council meeting on the 14th, but on July 28th. If the special land use recommendation is successful at the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission had very few changes recommended for the site plan. At this point, it would fall under, as a site plan only, the administrative rule in the city zoning ordinance. They're not doing more than a 10% increase. They're willing to incorporate the suggestions of the Planning Commission into the site plan. Under the circumstances, we would be more than happy to bring it back to a meeting, but if the Planning Commission is comfortable, we're also very comfortable doing that administratively as well. There was the addition of the screening wall and some other things that they've agreed to wholeheartedly. Is that something the Planning Commission wants to see again, or would be comfortable with us as staff approving just the site plan component of it administratively?
I don't know if others have thoughts on it. I know it gives me a little bit of pause, just because special land use are tied to a site plan.
Yep.
And since there was a lot of questions that were raised and they didn't have answers at that time, there was a lot of,
Understood.
kind of blanks.
Were the questions related to operations or to the site?
I think some about the site,
Some about the site.
about the spaces and screening and lighting. And weight dumpster.
Okay.
So I think I'd be a little hesitant to not see it at all again, especially because it's a special land use. I think special land uses have that discretionary element to it.
Yeah, normally we wouldn't even ask. If it wasn't a special land use,
Right.
we wouldn't even be asking. But we certainly understand, and if that's the way the
I don't know if
Planning
anyone
Commission
else
feels.
feels strongly about it either way. I don't feel strong. I just gives me pause.
Well, yeah, even if it gives pause, then we'll just plan on bringing it back. I think I see a lot of head nodding in agreement, so we'll just plan on bringing it back. I don't think they have an issue. They've been extraordinarily cooperative at this point, so we'll plan on bringing that back.
I think, too, just because this could potentially be a high-profile thing someday, and we don't want the city to be accused of doing anything even that could be construed as...
Understood.
Any discussion about the density meeting?
Yes. We tried very hard to have it here tonight. We spoke to several Planning Commission members and externally with some folks, and we decided that we approached Mark Nikita from Archive DS, who has done a lot of projects in the area that deal with density, infill, urban redevelopment. Has been associated with the Congress for New Urbanism and seemed to be the appropriate person to facilitate the development. Unfortunately, he was not available tonight. So we had hoped to move it back to next week and have it as a standalone meeting. But that does not fit in with the majority of the Planning Commission schedule. So that does not work. So our initial reaction is at that point we're 3 weeks away from the next regularly scheduled August meeting. He is available that August meeting. We could go back. I know it's a month delayed, which is unfortunate, but we can have him here at 5:30. We've even talked about moving the Planning Commission meeting back to 7:30 to give a full 2 hours for that initial discussion. We've talked about having him do a presentation. He was integral to the adoption of a density requirement or a height requirement within the Triangle District in Birmingham, which is one of the only examples of this type of ordinance in Southeast Michigan. So we feel it's important to have someone who has that experience here. He would lead the discussion, and then we're also looking for a few other folks to come in and maybe sit on a roundtable to discuss it afterwards, and we have some pretty good ideas who that is, and we're open to any other suggestions people may have. So we had hoped to have it here today, but we felt potentially rushing it was more dangerous than making sure that what appeared to be the unanimous choice for a facilitator was available. So our plan right now is to do that prior to the August meeting. Unless, my only concern with that is that I anticipate a rather good and robust discussion, and putting it prior to a regular meeting when I'm sure we're going to have agenda items again next month limits the amount of time. We can push the regular meeting back to 7:30, which gives us 2 hours. Does everybody feel 2 hours is enough for that initial discussion? We'll bring in food and everything else, but 2 hours is a reasonable time.
It is.
Okay.
Is there any, work we should be doing in preparation?
You know, we've talked about that. We don't have a lot of examples of where something like this has been implemented before, so we don't have a lot
We
of,
can just look at the Triangle District.
yeah, we'll get copies of the Triangle District. No, I mean, I think everybody's pretty versed in the history of it, the discussion, the debate, the pros and cons, you know, I mean, I think we've all talked about it at this point. I can't think of anything offhand that would be quote-unquote homework prior to the meeting.
Can you talk about the outcomes of this meeting? Can you sort of sketch out what the next steps after the meeting would be? What would you like the Planning Commission to sort of produce at the end of this 2-hour meeting? Would you take back the policy recommendations and you would craft a policy for the Planning Commission to approve at their next meeting? So we would be in September where the Planning Commission would review it and then it would go to council?
Well, I mean,
there is a sense of urgency on council to address it's been described to me as the Frankenmuth fake 2-story building problem.
Well, the only thing that's going to address it, I mean, what we're talking about is an ordinance. We're not talking about a policy.
Okay, an ordinance. Okay.
Yeah,
So
the question that comes out of the meeting is do we feel that it's imperative enough now, based on what we know about the area, that we take immediate action, or this is obviously a discussion that's going to take place in voluminous fashion as part of the master land use plan discussion. Are we confident enough that we know enough right now, based on this meeting, to make an ordinance amendment that impacts either the CBD or the DDA or whatever the geographic boundary of it is right now, and that ordinance amendment needs to take place immediately? Or do we feel like we need to research this more, have more study on it, and allow it to take place as part of what would be the standard planning process, and that would be to amend and update the master land use plan to say specifically what districts and what geographic area, and include business owners and building owners and everybody else in those discussions prior to making a recommendation for an ordinance amendment. So I would say at the end of this meeting is do we feel it's imperative enough to make that change immediately, or do we need to include a more robust discussion with building owners, tenants, and people who the ordinance will impact, and do that as part of the master land use plan process? And that would be the direction I'm looking for as staff right now, as to how to go. The geographic boundaries of it, and how much more input do you want from the people it impacts before making a recommendation to council? Because at this meeting, we're not inviting the building owners and the tenants, the people this impacts. So,
well, the flip side is how many more Frankenmuth buildings would the Planning Commission like to approve before the master land use plan is actually approved a year from now? So
What's the Frankenmuth building?
Christina has, it's a fake 2-story building, so it looks like 2 stories, sort of, like the one on.
Do we have one of those?
But that's what sort of the single, she described these buildings as Frankenmuth, where they look like 2 stories, but they're only 1.
Wait, but that doesn't look like 2 stories, I don't think.
yeah, I tend to disagree with that.
Yeah, I
That
don't
looks
think
like
so.
2 stories.
So-
Now, the massing, you could make an argument that the windows aren't high enough, that they should be 2/3 of the front facade. But a fake 2-story building to me has spandrel glass and is
It's a fake
designed.
black
Nobody
window.
believes that's
That's what I was
2-story. Yeah,
thinking. Right.
nobody believes that's and we all have our own opinion about it. But we have the controls right now to prevent fake 2-story. You can force a lower height if you want to. Now you impact the internal ceiling heights and things, but the question is do you want to force real second story? Not limit fake second story, but do you want to require real second story on these buildings?
And I think this is, we're kind of getting the discussion that will be had at that
Yeah,
meeting.
I think so too, yeah.
So, okay, and the only thing I'll put out there, that I won't be at that meeting, for sure. I'm not making, that's, my family vacation.
August 14th? Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. I'm
And
out
we have,
that week.
when we're down 2 commissioners already.
We're not even going to have a quorum that meeting,
But so-
unless we get a replacement
Yeah,
before that.
so I think in the email I sent out, I don't know if you guys can do like a go meeting and like put all the dates for the next Monday through Thursday for the next month and see if,
We
when.
can.
Because I think I'm available.
Are you guys available, do you guys want to try Saturday morning? The problem is Mark has a very limited schedule too.
Right.
I mean, do you want to forego having him as the facilitator and have us look for someone else, or?
I think he's the right facilitator.
Yeah, I think maybe do a go meeting and include a Saturday 9 to noon or something.
Okay, we'll get his schedule, find out when he's available, including a Saturday morning, and then we'll send out a meeting request and see if we can get everyone.
August 9th.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's the Green Cruise and Adele's neighborhood
the
group
9th?
party.
The Dream Cruise is the 16th, I thought.
Sorry, it is the 16th, but.
Yeah, I mean, this is the,
Yeah.
Throughout that whole.
so we're going to have to work hard. We might not even have a quorum at the next meeting unless we get some people appointed on the 28th.
Exactly, that's what I was just going to say.
Christ.
So it's like the 11th through the 16th is bad.
Right, and that's the Dream Cruise week, and that's.
Yeah, 16th is the Dream Cruise. And
Cheryl and everybody advertise it.
Yeah, I think like the next two. I know, he said Mark Nikita's out on vacation. So next week, Thursday didn't work, he said. And then Mark Nikita's out on vacation for a week.
Yeah.
And then there's 2 weeks after that fall before the next, that, I know, I'm wide open any day.
All right.
So.
We'll
I don't know
focus
if
on those 2
anything
weeks.
For anyone else.
Okay.
He said even if it's a weekend.
Okay.
I mean, if I can't make it, that's fine. And, you know, it'd be hard to find a meeting where every single person can make
Absolutely.
it. So it
Well,
is
and
what it
clearly,
is.
clearly the resignations, unfortunately, we
Right.
Kevin, you sure that you want to go now, man? You stick around for another month until we make quorum?
Well, I mean,
No,
part of it
literally.
is someone should get on board now with this stuff.
It's a good
Like,
point. I
one person
mean,
should start.
Do we have applications?
yeah, we have some good ones, and then we're contacting people, and then obviously, anybody who knows anybody, whether they're in the planning field, whether they have a good grasp of the character and feel of Ferndale, I mean, that's a lot of times what you need, is someone who understands what it is you guys are trying to accomplish as well. Send them our way. We'll get at their applications and get them in front of the planning
Well,
commission.
I guess my question was going to be, what's the process, and can we have them on board at the next council meeting? I mean, I don't know,
I hope to have 2 people in front of the council on the 28th.
of
I think
July.
Yeah.
Some council members would like to talk to the potential applicant first.
Why didn't you talk to them in public at the meeting?
Yeah, I think that shouldn't be I think it should be a public process, then not, like a backdoor, not, you know what I mean, just individual.
Yeah, otherwise, we're in danger of not being able to have a meeting in August, and we have projects.
Yeah.
And we're going to be releasing the master land use plan RFP, and, you know, that can't wait till September and stuff to get rolling.
So the backgrounds that we're losing, so we lost Jeff, who sort of brought I'm a property developer, but I don't do business in Ferndale, which hard to find, but was great to have. We're losing sort of our legal and research background, and then, you know, Luke with his transit walkability planner background.
Not only that, but state policies, I mean, yeah, that's
Absolutely.
a huge shot.
Do we have people who are in any of those pots, or should we be specifically looking for?
Yeah, I mean, especially,
Encouraging people.
yeah, and truthfully, if you can find someone of Luke's caliber who understands, and I don't mean to bring up names, but MML and policy and statewide initiatives and things of that nature, that's huge for a planning commission, because it brings that kind of statewide perspective to the board.
And we have some COG represented here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like a boilerplate we have to fill.
No, I was going to say, of any planning commission I've ever worked with, this one has the capacity to withstand the loss better than anyone. That's why I say, at
It's hard
best,
to have that background.
yeah,
I don't
you
think there needs to be a
guys,
specific formula, is my, whatever, you know.
I'm more interested in people who understand, or residents, and I'll even speak as a little bit as a resident, to understand when you guys, or when the board or the developments come here trying to protect the character, especially with some of the big projects we have coming up, it's just as important that they understand and can assimilate what you guys know protects that character, and can listen to the debate and understand what that is, as it is anything else. So I don't think there is one model. If you know good residents who believe in the city and love the city, send them our way. That's the most important thing.
A non-planner wouldn't be the worst idea to have
No.
one, or not someone
Not
completely
from my point of
outside
view.
from
Yeah,
one.
not-
Yeah.
would be-
I think we are kind of planner heavy.
Yeah, I was going to say, from my point of view, one less planner wouldn't do that. Yeah, architects are always good, who understand
we have
massing and
two.
sizing, yeah, so.
Was that Krista and engineering?
Architects.
Architect.
Yeah, we're pretty much planning architecture.
Yeah, transportation. Like I said, you guys got it covered. I mean, truthfully, a couple of really good residents who listen to the debate and are able to disseminate the information would be perfect. You have the skill sets here to be, and I'm not just blowing smoke, I mean, to be a good planning commission. What's good now is good people, so we can keep having meetings and keep these projects rolling.
I'm
So-
almost thinking someone would be good, someone who's like an entrepreneur, who
That's-
has opened a business in Ferndale. And we have a lot of those, obviously,
Yeah.
so.
You know, that's an excellent point. That really is. That just made 3 or 4 people pop into my head that don't do projects, that don't need to review projects. Yeah, let me think about that a little bit. That actually makes a little bit of sense. I know 2 right off the top of my head that would make perfect sense. Okay.
Okay. Any other administrative items?
I don't
Oh,
think so.
RFP for the master plan.
Yeah, we're gonna set it free.
Yeah, the only comment I had on it when I reviewed it, that was just sent over, I saw that the Parks and Rec
Yes.
thing was kind of snuck in there.
Yes.
And I just felt to give it its due, I mean, to be eligible for the MDNR, grant funding, there's very specific
Yep.
things that need to be in that, and I thought
Yep.
that was kind of hidden. And so from a consultant standpoint, if it says an RFP for a master plan, and then that's it, and then like bullet
Yeah, we're
12 says Parks and Rec plan update,
Yeah.
I felt that needed to be
Yep.
kind of more
Understood.
forthright, because it's kind of buried.
Yeah, understood.
And I wouldn't
And
have picked up on that unless you specifically called it out.
Okay, we'll make
So-
sure that it
That's almost
has
a whole separate, I mean,
Yep.
it's a whole separate thing.
Understood. And that's part of the reason we rolled it in, is because right now Recreation doesn't have the capacity to kind of handle that project on their own. So we'll make sure that it's
Yeah.
punched out,
It's a
and then
part-
it says the
two
plan
separate
at the end of the
plans.
day must meet the requirements for MDNR. And that's after, we've already talked about it internally, so.
Yeah, so just,
Okay.
yeah, make that, I would make that the title even, it's 2 plans.
All right. You got anything more on the RFP, Michelle? She's been handling it, so. Okay, yeah, we're gonna let it go. We gotta get it
Yes.
up and rolling. Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other commission items? Or, I'm sorry, administrative items, now we're commission items. Thanks for coming tonight, Kevin. Yeah, well,
thank you.
Thank you to everyone. It's been fun.
Could you
Enjoy your
pick the
Thursday night,
last
Thursday
busy
nights
time?
off.
I know, anytime in the last 3 years.
All right, and then I guess following up another discussion, if you know of anyone, send them to Derek for planning commission. Any other commission items? Otherwise, I keep looking at the clock and it's totally wrong.
What happened to the right one?
That's why I kept looking at my phone.
I know.
and recording.
Oh, well. Other than we'll adjourn the meeting, 7:53.
Fix the clock.
Oh, and I forgot to mention this. Oh, well. These are just the outdated, this is the correspondence from the billboard, which just came in late.
No, it was a copy to add, make sure that it was attached to their.
the minutes?
Now scan it
Oh,
when I actually
gotcha.
do it,
I
but-
think it's the same that we had last time.
I wasn't sure. Okay, got it.